Welcome to IMPACTX2050. Our community curates impact investment and innovation trends globally in EdTech, health tech, and food tech. Every week, we put the spotlight on innovators and investors to listen to their impact stories. Profitable, sustainable, inclusive, and innovative is how we define impact. So what's your definition? Coming up now is our next guest. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Kirill Pyshkin. I was born in Chisinau, the capital of Moldova. I currently live in Zurich, Switzerland, and I'm a senior portfolio manager within the Thematic Equities team at Credit Suisse. I'm here to talk about investing in education, investing in future of learning with a purpose.
Kirill, welcome. I'm very pleased to welcome you here at ImpactX Stories. You're a portfolio manager focused on education technology. And before we talk about your business and what you see, let me start with this personal question. How did you end up in that position? Is there defining someone in your life, in your education, that led you to focus on the future of learning and the future of education?
Previously, I was a generalist portfolio manager. That means I would invest in anything. But more recently started to specialize, and I'm particularly passionate about education because for me personally, education is everything. It's, I'm coming from relatively poorer region in Europe and ended up in the position that I'm in, achieving the relative wealth and success purely due to education. So for me, it's personal. Likewise, I think that for any country developing or developed, the best thing they could do is to invest in education.
Can you tell us how you invest in education? How do you do stock picking? How do you look at trends? What are you looking for in terms of opportunities and investment opportunities?
Well, we look at education technology specifically rather than education. So education is an old sector. Education technology is an emerging sector, relatively nascent. For example, looking at penetration of technology in education is less than 5% today. That's really early stage. So in a situation like this, it's very important to try to spot trends, emerging winners, what the future would look like, and that's what my job is about.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think, as a sector, education is underrepresented in public equity market? It's a large industry, $6 trillion. There is an unprecedented level of innovation, of consolidation opportunities. Yet, if you add up all the market capitalization of education and tech companies, that represent only 5% of the total size of the sector. If you compare this to healthcare, for example, it's 50%. So why do you think the sector is underrepresented in public equity?
Well, first of all, it was quite hard to make money in education because you're right, the sector is huge, several $1 trillion and growing, but the growth of the education sector itself isn't that exciting. What exciting is what's happening within the sector. It's the technologies this is emerging. And that's what the sector was lacking for many years because it is the technology that normally brings innovation and with that reduce costs. Education sector has not done that, and as a result, the penetration of technology is very low, and as a result of that, the costs have gone up much more than inflation for many years.
Mm-hmm. And tell us a bit about ESG and impact. And you mentioned, investing with a purpose. How does that, affect or impact, I guess, your investment decision? And how do you apply ESG and impact criteria in your investment decisions?
So, for example, you can invest in education and simply buy anything that is related to education. You could buy, I don't know, student housing. You could buy student loans. You could buy incredibly profitable universities, which one may argue overcharge their students or charge as much as they can get away with. And that would be called investing in education. for me, this is not exactly the purpose of investing in education with the idea to reduce costs and efficiencies and improve efficiencies, because this doesn't improve anything really. However, if you focus on technology, technology is what has reduced costs incredibly in other sectors. Like if you take semiconductors with the Moore's law, where we're not paying twice as much for the phone every year, despite the improvement in functionality of the phone. This is because of the technology and technological innovation that allowed us to pack more and more chips in that same phone for the same price. Again, it's a bit harder to do in education, because if you do this analogy with kids and pack twice as many kids in the class every year, you're not going to get efficiencies. Instead, you will break down the education process, because every child ultimately needs individual approach. And if you do it in a traditional way, it's very hard. However, luckily today, we could see some new technologies emerging, like adaptive learning, which would help to emulate this cost efficiencies through technology, which ultimately reduces costs.
I mean, I mentioned that education was a large sector, $6 trillion. A lot of that money and budget is owned and controlled by the state, and a small portion of this is privatized, but privatization in education is accelerating. Do you think that edtech is adopted first in the segments of education that are private as opposed to state controlled? Do you think there is inertia in the sector?
Well, I think it's, well, first of all, if you consider from the government point of view, I don't think there is any government in the world which would refuse to reduce the cost and improve efficiency at the same time. So if an edtech company come into any government in the world saying that here's our proposition, we'll help you to make it more efficient, get more money for your buck, nobody will object to that. Likewise, that make it hopefully less susceptible to government controls, because again, this goes in line with the government policies. And to the latter part of your question is, yes, for sure, innovation is higher where there is a gap left by the government, where the government has underinvested, or perhaps there are inefficiencies in the system. So if you look in the developing markets, you could see that maybe there are not enough teachers, not enough schools. You could do that. You can improve this through technology. If you look at the developed markets, the issue will be the increasing cost of education above inflation. Again, if you're looking from the point of view of technology, you could help that in the developed markets by reducing cost of education. So opportunities exist, but they're slightly different in developed and developing markets.
Mm-hmm. What are the lessons learned from your most successful investment so far as a fund manager?
I would say that important lesson is not to forget to take profits, because the good times may not last. And if you take profits, you could perhaps find a better opportunity for the short to medium term, and hopefully you could do it again and again repeatedly.
Mm-hmm. And so, again, what would be the lesson learned from your worst investment? But maybe it's the same answer.
I think it's slightly different for fund managers, and the issue that a lot of fund managers face is falling in love with the stock. So let's say you love the technology, you love the business model, you love the management, but it's not working. Something is not working. The market is clearly telling you that you're wrong, but it so well. You've fallen in love with the stock, and there is a hesitancy to cut it or reduce the position, which you ultimately need to do to protect again the money of your investors.
So no love stories in
No
fund
love
management.
stories.
Very good. Kirill, I'm guessing you're a lifelong learner.
I am.
Okay. What has been the last thing you've learned? Or what are you learning right now?
I'm learning German. I've been learning it for last several years. Before that, I learned French for about 20 years.
That I know, yeah.
I'm relatively good in French. German, not quite yet. It's it's quite hard language, especially from the grammar point of view. And but nevertheless, I do like learning and languages in particular.
Well, you chose the hard way, between French and German. Congratulations for that. Let's move to the next section of the interview, which is the rapid fire question. So I'll ask you very quick questions and you have to answer by A or B. So degree or skills?
Skills.
State school or private school?
Private school.
Why?
That's
Sorry,
not
usually,
rapid question, is it?
usually I don't do that, but I wanted to surprise you.
Well, private schools have shown better results. They're doing something right. If you can afford it, I would, I would suggest you do it for your kids.
Okay. Teacher or technology?
Teacher.
Remote work or every day in the office?
Every day in the office.
Profit or impact?
Both.
Okay, so can you define impact for us?
Impact is, I define it as outcome of your activity. And it's not the same as ESG. So it's not how well you report in the CO2 emissions. It's not how well, your policies and protocols are designed. For me, it's actually what your products and services help to achieve. And it has to be measurable.
As a fund manager, and I agree, ESG and impact are two different things. Do you measure the impact of every company you invest in? Or do you drive that agenda within the board or within the management? How much influence you have on this?
We publish a very extensive impact report where we do disclose every company without naming the company. With one quantitative metric, we show how it's linked to specific SDGs. And typically it would be SDG 4 or SDG 8.
Can you explain SDG 4 and 8 for those who don't know what those are?
SDG 4 is education, and within that it has certain sub-goals. So for example, there is a section there for younger kids. There is a section there for skills relevant for work. So there are sub-targets within each SDGs. SDG 8, it's more about work, employment, equal pay, full employment, working more efficiently. Again, within SDG 8, there are sub-goals.
Mm-hmm. Kirill, if you had to nominate the next interviewee, someone who has an influence on the world of impact investment, the world of education technology, who would that be and why?
I would nominate James Gifford. He's one of the founders of UNPRI, so United Nations Principles of Responsible Investing. He was many years ago among people who defined ESG and why it is ESG rather than GES, for example. It's an interesting story, but you can ask him. And he's also very passionate about education technology. We co-authored a report together with him during the pandemic about EdTech, and it was called EdTech during the pandemic. So James Gifford.
Okay, we will contact him. And now, Kirill, one last thing. What will be a prediction for the education technology industry if you had to make one?
It will be more enjoyable.
Okay, so more consumer friendly?
Process, more. I would go with the direction of gamification, immersive learning, these things like that kids like, and typically they engage more, and as a result you get better outcomes. So I would go with edutainment.
Edutainment, a love story with gamified love story with a product. This was Kirill Pyshkin for ImpactX. Thank you very much, Kirill. It was a pleasure as always. And we really looking forward to see how you continue to invest in the sector. You're one of the very few, one of the pioneers to invest in the sector with a public equity fund. So good luck and thanks again.
Thank you, Benjamin.